Good morning, everyone. Good Yontif.
Good Yontif.
We begin with words of gratitude this morning, with gratitude for our souls returned, with gratitude for this community, with gratitude for our awesome tech team led so skillfully by Don Abrams, and for each and every soul joining us this morning from wherever you are in this world. Moda'ani, I give thanks. Moda'ani lefanecha, melech chai v'kayam, shehechezarta nishmati bechemla, bechemla, Rabba emunate, Rabba emunate, Rabba emunatecha, moda'ani lefanecha, Kayam, shehechezarta binishmati bechemla, bechemla, Rabba emunate, Rabba emunate, Rabba emunatecha.
Whoever was wrapped in a talit in one's youth will never forget. Taking it out of the soft sack, opening the folded talit, spreading it, kissing the border along its length, sometimes embroidered and sometimes embossed. Afterwards, a great sweep over the head, like the heavens, like a chuppah, like a parachute. Afterwards, folding it around one's head as if plaiting hide and seek, and then wrapping the body tight, tight, letting it fold you like a cocoon, and then opening it like wings for flying. This imagery comes from the Shabbat morning prayer book and is offered to help a person prepare to wrap themselves in a talit. Almost every Shabbat, I try to take the time to reread that reading. I remember the first time I put on a talit in rabbinic school. To tell you the truth, it didn't feel comforting. It felt strange. I was raised going to Friday night services as a child, and so wearing a talit in prayer was something I had done once for my bat mitzvah, but not regularly since. But we prayed daily in rabbinic school, and so the talit went on daily. And by the end, as I wrapped myself in the talit, and at that point I had many, and each had its own weight and feel, like a favorite wrap or shawl, my body would accept that indeed I was safe, settled, ready for prayer. It is the same image the sukkah offers us as we are out in the broad world, that we are in fact surrounded and protected while still connected. We offer you this morning service with that same prayer. Whether or not you wear a talit as you pray with us this morning, whether you wrap yourself in a comfy blanket as you sit on your couch and cuddle in, we pray that you feel sheltered in the peace of our tradition and our community.
steps and help me find my way. I need your shelter now. Rock me in your arms and guide my steps and help me make this day a song of praise to you. Rock me in your arms and guide my steps.
As we prepare for the blessing to put on the talit, I invite you to consider what you need to feel held in prayer this morning. Please join with me in this blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehitatef batzitzit.
Amen.
We continue with the words, Ma tovu. How beautiful are the places, the technologies that enable us to gather in community.
Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael.
On page 156, a blessing, a reminder that each day we awake is a gift. Blessed are you, Holy One, who has formed the human body with wisdom, an intricate network of channels, vessels, and openings. This wondrous structure and the flow of life within us allows us to stand before you and give thanks. Let us cherish this gift of flesh and blood. Honor it as God's creation. We continue with a blessing. We are more than just a body. A pure soul is implanted within each of us, and we are gifted with the opportunity each day to care for that soul.
Elohai Neshama Shenatatabi Shenatatabi Elohai Neshama Shenatatabi Shenatatabi Tehorahi, Tehorahi, Tehorahi. You created me, you shaped me, you breathed me into life. You created me, you shaped me, you breathed me into life. Elohai, Neshama, Shenatatabi, Shenatatabi, Elohai, Neshama, Shenatatabi, Shenatatabi, Tehorahi, Tehorahi, Tehorahi. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam. Baruch she'amar Baruch Hu. Baruch oseh bereshit. Baruch omer who spoke and the world came to be. Praise be the source of creation. Praise be the one who spoke and the world came to be. Praise be God, Baruch Hu. Baruch she'amar Baruch she'amar Baruch Hu. Baruch oseh bereshit. Baruch omer ve'oseh. Praise be the one who spoke and the world came to be. Praise be the source of creation. Praise be the one who spoke and the world came to be. Praise be God, Baruch Hu. Praise be God, Baruch Hu. Praise be God, Baruch Hu. Hamalka Hayoshevet Al Kisei Ram V'Nisa שוכן עד מרום וקדוש שמו וכתוב רננו צדיקים באדוני לישרים נאווה תהילה בפי ישרים תתרומם ובדברי צדיקים תתברך ובלשון חסידים תתקדש, ובקרב קדושים תתהלל, ובמקהלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל ברינה. שמך מלכנו, השתבח שמך לעד מלכנו. Ad olam. Baruch atah Adonai, source of the impulse to give thanks, who desires a world filled with song and a universe of life.
We continue with the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Le'olam va'ed.
May learning your Torah light up our eyes. May our hearts embrace your mitzvot.
V'ha'er einenu b'toratecha, b'toratecha, v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha, b'mitzvotecha. Ve'yachel levaveinu le'ahava u'yirah et shemecha ve'lo nevosh le'olam va'ed, ve'lo nevosh le'olam, le'olam va'ed. V'ha'er einenu b'toratecha, b'toratecha, v'dabek libeinu b'mitzvotecha, b'mitzvotecha. Ve'yachel levaveinu le'ahava u'yirah et shemecha ve'lo nevosh le'olam va'ed, ve'lo nevosh le'olam, le'olam va'ed. Ve'yachel levaveinu le'ahava u'yirah et shemecha ve'lo nevosh le'olam va'ed, ve'lo nevosh le'olam, le'olam
You are the one who unites all things, who links life to life in a sacred chain. The forests anchored in the soil breathe air into our lungs. Our faces are reflected in the creatures of earth. We carry the sea within us. Our fate is connected to rivers and deserts. Our family, a many-branched tree of life. All beings intertwine in you. All are encompassed in Adonai Echad. Thus, no person is an island, no soul exists apart. To say Echad is to know this truth, to see the world whole, humankind undivided. Precious and holy are these words we speak. Adonai Echad, we proclaim you one.
Baruch atah Adonai, habocher ba'amo Yisrael, be'ahava. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol me'odecha vehayu hadivarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavcha hayom al levavecha vishinantam levanecha vidibarta bam beshivtecha beveitecha uvelechtecha vaderech uveshochbecha uvekumecha Ukshartam leot al yadecha, vehayu letotafot bein einecha, uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, uvisharecha. Leman tizkeru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai, v'yitem kedoshim lelohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, lihiot lachem lelohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem.
As we prepare for the amidah, in the depths of night by the edge of the river, Jacob was left alone. In heartfelt longing in the temple of God, Hannah uttered her prayers alone. In the barren wilderness, in doubt and despair, Elijah found God alone. In the holiest day, in the Holy of Holies, the high priest entered alone. We are bound to one another in myriad ways, but each soul needs time to itself. In solitude, we meet the solitary one. Silence makes space for the still small voice. For the psalmist says, "Deep calls unto deep." From the depths of our soul, we seek what is most profound. Please rise and embody your spirit for the amidah.
Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, sefatai tiftach, ufi yagid tehilatecha. Sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu ve'Elohei avoteinu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora, El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imahot Umevi Geula Livnei V'neihem Leman Shemo Be'ahava. Zochreinu lechaim, melech hafetz b'chaim, v'chodveinu b'sefer hachaim, lemancha Elohim chaim, melech ozer umoshia umagen. Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'ezorat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, mechae hakol atah rav lehoshia. Mechakel chaim bechesed, mechaye hakol berachamim rabim, somech noflim verofeh cholim, umatir asurim, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אל הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל.
Continue, Uva shofar gadol, and a great shofar will cry.
ובשופר גדול ייתקע, וכל דממה דקה יישמע. ומלאכים יחפזון, וחיל ורעדה יוחזון, ויאמרו הנה יום הדין, לבכות על צבא מרום בדין. כי לא יזכו בעיניך בדין, וכל באי עולם יעברון לפניך, יעברון לפניך, כי בני מרון, כי בני מרון, כבקרת רועד רו, מעביר צונו תחת שבטו. כן תעביר ותספור ותמנה, כן תעביר ותספור ותמנה, ותפקוד נפש כל חי, ותחתוך קצבה לכל בריאה, ותכתוב את גזר דינם.
Please read with me. And so a great shofar will cry, Tekiah. A still small voice will be heard. Angels in a whirl of fear and trembling will say, behold the day of judgment, for they too are judged. In your eyes, even they are not blameless. All who come into the world pass before you, like sheep before their shepherd. As a shepherd considers the flock when it passes beneath the staff, you count and consider every life. You set bounds, you decide destiny, you inscribe judgments.
בראש השנה ייכתבון Uviyom som kippur yechatemun. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun. Uviyom som kippur yechatemun. Kama ya'avorun v'chama yibareun. Mi yichyeh u'mi yamut. Mi v'kitzo u'mi lo v'kitzo. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun. Uviyom som kippur yechatemun. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun. Uviyom som kippur yechatemun. Mi va'esh u'mi va'mayim. Mi va'cherev u'mi va'chaya. Mi va'ra'av u'mi va'tzama. Mi va'rash u'mi va'magefa. Mi va'chanika u'mi va'skila. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun. Uviyom som kippur yechatemun. Berosh Hashanah yikatevun. Uviyom som kippur yechatemun. Mi yanuach u'mi yanua. Mi yashkit u'mi yitoraf. Mi yishalef u'mi yitjaser. Mi ya'ani u'mi ya'ashir. Mi yushpal u'mi yarum.
On Rosh Hashanah, this is written. On the fast of Yom Kippur, this is sealed. How many will pass away from this world? How many will be born into it? Who will live and who will die? Who will reach the ripeness of age? Who will be taken before their time? Who by fire and who by water? Who by war and who by beast? Who by famine and who by drought? Who by earthquake and who by plague? Who by strangling and who by stoning? Who will rest and who will wander? Who will be tranquil and who will be troubled? Who will be calm and who tormented? Who will live in poverty and who in prosperity? Who will be humbled and who exalted?
Uteshuvah, utefila, utzedakah, ma'avirin et roa hagezerah.
But through return to the right path, through prayer and righteous giving, we can transcend the harshness of the decree. You are everything we praise you for. Slow to anger, quick to forgive. You do not wish the death of sinners, but urge them to return from their ways and live. Until the day of death, you wait for them. You accept them at once if they return. Since you created us, you know our impulses. We are but flesh and blood. We turn to a modern Avinu malkenu. Avinu malkenu, open our hearts so that we will see all the things we have been unwilling to see and grow in humility and compassion.
Avinu malkenu, remove cynicism from our hearts that we may experience and move through despair and hopelessness to be the person you are calling us to be.
Avinu malkenu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural racism, personal racism, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions.
Avinu malkenu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural sexism, personal sexism, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions.
Avinu malkenu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural heterosexist, personal heterosexist, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions.
Avinu malkenu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural ableism, personal ableism, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions.
Avinu malkenu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural ageism, personal ageism, and bigotry, including in our Jewish institutions.
Avinu malkenu, inspire us to be a contribution to efforts to end structural anti-Semitism, personal anti-Semitism, and bigotry.
Avinu malkenu, inspire us to be compassionate to those with whom we disagree. May we see their humanity, even when they fail to see ours.
Avinu malkenu, move us to our own humanity, wherein we live what you have taught us all our lives. We are all your creations.
Avinu malkenu, let us not rest comfortably in the words of these prayers, waiting for you to first act on us. We must act on ourselves.
Avinu malkenu, have mercy on us and answer us, for our deeds have little merit. Deal with us charitably and lovingly, and redeem us.
We invite you to rise and embody your spirit.
Avinu malkenu, Avinu malkenu, Avinu malkenu, chanenu va'anenu, ki ein banu masim. Aseh malkenu, Avinu malkenu, chanenu le'anenu, ki ein banu masim.
Shana Tova, and hello fellow congregants wherever you are. I hope you are with family, or friends, or both, and that I see you soon in person. I'm here to talk about what this past year has meant to me, in the hope that you will find some nuggets that will help you in your own reflections, your talk with yourself. To bring out a boomer touchstone, this past year has been a long, strange trip. So I'm going to try to distill some themes and lessons from this long year into a single day in June. The day started with morning minyan with Beth. As always, this special half hour brought me solace, community, and inspiration. Beth shared a deeply moving remembrance of a friend from Michigan who had recently died. We all owe him a debt of gratitude. He saw Beth's potential to be a cantor. He heard her voice and encouraged her to pursue the path that brought her to us. That's the deepest kind of friend, someone who sees something in you that opens up possibilities. Beth shared a passage from the Irish poet and philosopher John O'Donohue, who might have been a rabbi in a past life. He spoke to the opportunity that comes with taking time to reflect. He said, "All holiness is about learning to hear the voice of your own soul. It is always there, and the more deeply you learn to listen, the greater surprises and discoveries that will unfold." To enter into the gentleness of your own soul changes the tone and quality of your life. Your life is no longer consumed by the hunger for the next event, experience, or achievement. You learn to come down from the treadmill and walk on the earth. This past year, I've had the opportunity, the unexpected opportunity, to come down from the treadmill and walk on the earth. Literally, I've gotten off the treadmill of commuting, slowed down the pace of my work, and taken a lot more walks by myself, with my wife Heidi, and with friends. And on a deeper level, I've had the quiet, the time, and the inspiration from the temple to listen to the voice of my soul and the voices of some deep souls who shared their journeys and wisdom. While I was walking on the Mystic River that day in June, I listened to an interview with Joy Harjo, who is a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation and the Poet Laureate of the United States. She said what happens in this country is that Native stories, our presence, has basically been disappeared from the American story. Because if it's true that we're still here, if it's true that what did happen was grand theft and massacre, then there's something inherently broken with the American story that needs to be repaired. That repair, for me, starts with remembering that the place that we call home, this Commonwealth of Massachusetts, bears the name of the native nation that lived here and cared for this land when the English settlers arrived 400 years ago. The people of the Massachusetts nation walked the same shores and paddled the same waters that we enjoy and draw comfort from today. To begin the work of repair, I have much to learn about their stories and what I can do to help heal the brokenness. Joy Harjo also said it's important that everyone realize that they have a connection with the natural world. It's not something that just belongs to the indigenous peoples. She continued to say, we might be closer because we've been here longer to particular elements of it, but there is something that is inherently part of the legacy of human beings. I felt that connection as I sat on the bank of the Mystic River, watching the insects and the birds and the ripples in the water. As I sat by the water, I thought about the past year. It has been a time of reflection and learning, and also a time of loss. In our family, we lost my mother-in-law, Edna Falk, and my aunt, Peg Blood, and the yahrzeit list is full of stories like ours. And while vaccines have started to bring back possibilities, opportunities to gather, to attend plays and art exhibits, and to travel, the losses of all kinds, the memories of quarantining, and the worries about the pandemic are still with us. And we are virtually gathering again this year. As I sat with both my memories and the living present, I came to know and accept the sadness that I couldn't truly feel while I was still on the treadmill. I also felt liberated from that treadmill. And on that day, I waded into the lake and felt calmed and healed, and I was grateful. And I thought of another voice that I've come to love, the singer David Berkeley. He articulates what I and maybe you have sought to balance. He says we want to know when we can get back to who we used to be, but also this: there are some things that I don't want to lose when all the engines turn back on. How all the colors shine in your eyes and mine when the world sits still a while. So I hope you find these words helpful to you as you sit still a while today, and that you carry with you what you have found this year as we journey together in the next year, whatever it brings. May you be inscribed for blessing and peace.
Let the reading of Torah be like a prayer, a meditation to remind us what we strive for, a chant that binds us to the chain of generations.
Let the reading of Torah be like prayer, a moment of purest solidarity with our people's hopes and history, an invitation to affirm or dissent, to challenge or believe, to ask why or say amen.
Let the reading of Torah be like a prayer, flowing like waters that renew the spirit, refreshing and sweet to nourish the soul.
Let the reading of Torah be like prayer, every word a blessing, every verse a conversation with God.
This morning, we read Deuteronomy 29. You stand this day, all of you, in the presence of Adonai, your God, your tribal heads, elders, and officials, every person and child of Israel, and the stranger in the midst of your camp, from the one who cuts your wood to the one who draws your water, to enter into the covenant of Adonai, your God. The rabbis wondered, why was there a need for a covenant just before they entered the land of Israel, after there had already been a covenant entered into at Sinai? The author of the Tanya compares this to when two people make a covenant or a commitment at the beginning of a relationship. It is not for the present time, for in that time they are very close, but for the future time, because sometimes the feeling of closeness dissolves. This morning, the Torah reading shared is in the midst of a day when the prayers, the slichot, can bring up so much difficult emotion and so much pain can be unearthed. It is a day when we examine that which is ruptured in ourselves, our relationship, and our world. But this Torah reading is a reminder to us that as we deal with the rupture, we also hold a vision of oneness, of wholeness, to believe that we are always connected or invited into connection with the source of all. In reading Torah today, we affirm that Yom Kippur means not to be swallowed up by the difficulty of the task, but instead invited to investigate the task from a place of strength. We turn to our Torah chanting this morning.
Baruch hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אתם ניצבים היום כולכם לפני אדוני אלוהיכם, ראשיכם שבטיכם, זקניכם ושוטריכם, כל איש ישראל, טפכם נשיכם, וגרך אשר בקרב מחנך, מחוטב עצך עד סואב ממך, לעברך בברית אדוני אלוהיך ובעלתו אשר אדוני אלוהיך קוראתי ממך היום.
בלו אתם לבדכם אנוכי קוראת את הברית הזאת ואת העלה הזאת, כי את אשר ישנו פה עמנו עומד היום לפני אדוני אלוהינו, ואת אשר איננו פה עמנו היום.
כי המצווה הזאת אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לא נפלאתי ממך ולא רחוקה היא, לא בשמיים היא לאמור. מי יעבר לנו השמיימה ויקחך לנו, וישמיענו אותה ונעשנה, ולא מעבר לים היא לאמור. מי יעבר לנו אל עבר הים, ויקחך לנו, וישמיענו אותה ונעשנה, כי קרוב אליך הדבר מאוד בפיך ובלבבך לעשותו.
ראה נתתי לפניך היום את החיים ואת הטוב, את המוות ואת הרע, אשר אנוכי צווך היום לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך, ללכת בדרכיו ולשמור מצוותיו וחוקותיו ומשפטיו, והיית ורבית וברכך אדוני אלוהיך. הארץ אשר אתה בשלמה לרשתה, ואם יפנה לבבך ולא תשמע ונידקת, השתחווית לאלוהים אחרים ועבדתם.
העידותי בכם היום את השמיים ואת הארץ, החיים והמוות, נתתי לפניך הברכה והקללה, ובחרת בחיים למען תהיה אתה וזרעך, לאהבה את אדוני אלוהיך, לשמוע בקולו ולדבקבו, כי הוא חייך ואורה ימיך, לשבת על האדמה אשר נשבע אדוני לאבותיך, לאברהם, ליצחק וליעקב, לתת לכם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
How incredible to hear the words of our B'nai Mitzvah students blessing the reading of Torah. We turn now to the chanting of the Haftarah. In 1885, the governing body of Reform rabbis wrote, "We deem it our duty to participate in the great task of modern time, to solve on the basis of justice and righteousness the problems presented by the contrasts of evils in the present organization of society." In 1937, Reform rabbis affirmed, "Judaism seeks the attainment of a just society by the application of its teaching to the economic order, to industry and commerce, and to national and international affairs. It is the elimination of man-made memory. Its aim is the elimination of man-made misery and suffering, of poverty and degradation, of tyranny and slavery, of social inequality and prejudice, of ill will and strife." In 1999, the Reform movement grounded its statement of principles in its commitment to social justice and in the notion of tikkun olam, literally the act of repairing the world, arguing that our actions for justice and righteousness help to bring about a better tomorrow. But this morning's Haftarah from Isaiah reminds us that it is not an innovation of Reform Judaism to engage in social justice. Rather, it is a continuation of one of the earliest teachings of Judaism, that the ritual and spiritual life of Judaism is meant to plant the seeds of just living in our souls. We continue with the chanting of Isaiah chapter 58. I hope we're continuing with the chanting of Isaiah chapter 58, which reads, "Is this not the fast I desire? To break the bonds of injustice and remove the heavy yoke, to let the oppressed go free and release all those who are enslaved? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and to take the homeless poor into your home, and never to neglect your own flesh and blood?"
No, okay.
With these words, Beth will offer us a selection of blessings of the a selection of verses, excuse me. I'll get myself together. A selection of verses from Isaiah 58.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar binviim tovim v'ratza v'divrehem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'Torah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'nviei ha'emet v'tzedek. Kera v'garon al tachshoch kashofer harem kolecha v'haged la'ami pish'am ulveit Yaakov chatotam ve'oti yom yom yidrishun v'da'at drachai yechpatsun kegoy asher tzedaka asa umishpat Elohav lo azav yishaluni mishpatei tzedek kirvat Elohim yechpatsun lama tsamnu velo ra'ita inenu nafshenu velo teda hen v'yom somchem timsu chefetz v'chol atzvechem tingosu. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam tzur kol haolamim sadik b'chol hadorot ha'el hane'eman ha'omer ve'oseh hamdaber umkayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek. Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'ne'emanim devarecha v'davar echad midvarecha chor lo yashuv rekam ki al melech ne'eman v'rachaman ata Baruch ata Adonai ha'el hane'eman b'chol devarav Rachem al Tzion ki beit chayenu v'la'aluvat nefesh toshia b'mhera v'yamenu Baruch ata Adonai Mesameach Zion bevaneha al haTorah v'al ha'avodah v'al hanevi'im v'al Yom HaKippurim hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu limchila v'lislicha ulchapara lechavod ultifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach umvarchim otach יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד ודברך אמת וקיים לעד ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מוחל וסולח לעוונותינו ולעוונות עמו בית ישראל ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה מלך על כל הארץ מקדש ישראל ויום הכיפורים.
Amen. We continue with our Vidui Uslichot service, turning to our confession and prayers for forgiveness. Page 292. We stand in humility, conscious of our failings, Shema kolenu Adonai, hear our call.
True sacrifice to God is a penitent spirit. You treasure a crushed and repentant heart.
For you are close to the brokenhearted, and you give strength to a suffering soul.
You are the healer of shattered hearts. You are the one who binds up our wounds.
We continue with Shema kolenu, hear our call.
Shema kolenu, Shema kolenu, Shema kolenu Adonai Eloheinu, chus v'rachem aleinu, chus v'rachem aleinu, v'kabel barachamim uvratzon et tefilatenu, v'kabel barachamim uvratzon et tefilatenu. Shema kolenu, Shema kolenu, Shema kolenu Adonai Eloheinu, chus v'rachem aleinu, chus v'rachem aleinu. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh yamenu kekedem, Chadesh yamenu kekedem. Shema kolenu, Shema kolenu, kolenu, Shema kolenu, Shema kolenu Adonai Eloheinu, chus v'rachem aleinu, chus v'rachem aleinu.
Our God and God of all generations, may our prayers reach your presence, and when we turn to you, do not be indifferent. Adonai, we are arrogant and stubborn, claiming to be blameless and free of sin. In truth, we have stumbled and strayed. We have done wrong.
Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu dofi, He'evinu vehirshanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tafalnu sheker, Yahatznu ra, Kizavnu, Latznu, Maradnu, Niatznu, Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararnu, Kishinu Orev, Rashanu, Shichatnu, Ti'avnu, Avnu Ta'inu Titanu Yai Dai 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 Ya da 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 ya da 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 da.
We continue with the Al-Khait, the long confession. I invite you to rise in body or in spirit.
Al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha be'ones uveratzon ve'al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha be'yodim uve'lo yodim. The ways we have wronged you under duress and by choice, and harm we have caused in your world consciously and unconsciously. Al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha bivli da'at, va'al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha beritzat raglayim lehara. The ways we have wronged you through our thoughtlessness, and harm we have caused in your world through impulsive acts of malice. Al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha bechozek yad, ve'al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha bezilzul horim umorim. The ways we have wronged you by abusing our power, and harm we have caused in your world through disrespect to parents and teachers. Al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha beyetzer hara, ve'al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha bekashyut oref. The ways we have wronged you by giving in to our hostile impulses, and harm we have caused in your world through inflexibility and stubbornness. Al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha bechachash uvechazav, ve'al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha bekalut rosh. The ways we have wronged you through lies and deceit, and harm we have caused in your world by making light of serious matters. Al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha b'siach sifrotenu, ve'al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha b'tsarut ayin. The ways we have wronged you in our routine conversations, and harm we have caused in your world through envy. Ve'al kulam Eloah selichot, selach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu. Ve'al kulam Eloah selichot, selach lanu mechal lanu, selach lanu mechal lanu kaper lanu. Al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha bagalui uvasater, ve'al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha b'sinat chinam. The ways we have wronged you openly and secretly, and harm we have caused in your world by hating without cause. Al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha b'frikat ol, ve'al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha b'ma'achal uvemishteh. The ways we have wronged you by losing self-control, and harm we have caused in your world through consumption of food and drink. Al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha begilui arayot, ve'al-Khait shechatanu lefanecha be'imutz halev. the ways we have wronged you through sexual immorality, and harm we have caused in your world by hardening our hearts. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בנשך ובמרבית, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך במשא ובמתן. The ways we have wronged you through greed and exploitation, and harm we have caused in your world through dishonesty in business. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בהרהור הלב, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך ברכילות. The ways we have wronged you through our innermost thoughts, and harm we have caused in your world through gossip and rumor. על חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחפת שוחד, ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך בחילול השם. The ways we have wronged you by offering or accepting bribes, and harm we have caused in your world by profaning your name in public. ועל כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו מחל לנו, כפר לנו. ועל כולם אלוה סליחות, סלח לנו מחל לנו, סלח לנו מחל לנו, כפר לנו.
We continue with Ki Anu Amecha, we are your people.
Ki anu amecha ve'ata Eloheinu, anu vanecha ve'ata Avinu, anu avadecha ve'ata Adonenu, anu ka'alecha ve'ata chelkeinu, anu nachalatecha ve'ata goralenu, anu tzonecha ve'ata ro'enu, anu karmecha ve'ata notrenu, anu ve'ulatecha ve'ata yotzreinu, anu rayatecha ve'ata dodenu, anu segulatecha ve'ata keroveinu, anu amecha ve'ata malkenu, anu mamirecha ve'ata mamireinu.
For every act of goodness, let us affirm the good we have done. Let us acknowledge our acts of healing and repair. For the good we have done by acting with self-restraint and self-control. For the good we have done through acts of generosity and compassion.
for the good we have done by offering children our love and support,
for the good we have done by honoring our parents with care and respect,
for the good we have done through acts of friendship and hospitality,
for the good we have done through acts of forgiveness and reconciliation,
for the good we have done by keeping promises and honoring commitments,
for the good we have done through the works of our hands and by serving others,
for the good we have done by caring for the earth and sustaining its creatures,
for the good we have done by housing the homeless, feeding the hungry, and welcoming the stranger,
for the good we have done by acting with integrity and honesty,
for the good we have done through thoughtful and encouraging words,
for the good we have done by caring for our health and that of our loved ones,
for the good we have done by strengthening our Jewish community,
for the good we have done through acts of civic engagement and tikkun olam.
All these have brought light and healing into the world. May these acts inspire us to renew our efforts in the year to come.
Amen.
Not infrequently, I open my kids' backpacks that are extremely heavy at the end of the day and discover that the treasures that are weighing them down is a whole bunch of rocks. I always laugh as I sneak them down the front steps and back outside, because it seems my kids learned a habit from me. If you've seen my desk, you know I collect rocks. Whereas my kids seem to think that bigger equals better, the rocks I collect are usually palm-sized, always smooth, and chosen to help me think through a moment when I'm stuck. I use the rocks as I meditate, as I concentrate on new skills, or I think through a tricky situation, sort of like a worry stone. One in particular is engraved. Begin again. I tend to grab this one quite often. Usually, after I realize I've made a mistake, but not just any mistake. One of those habitual mistakes of mine, the kind that I seem to do over and over and over again. The kind of mistake that makes me wonder, how could I have again? The kind of intransigent behavior that keeps me in the same place, that keeps me from changing, which is a very Yom Kippur thing to think about. One day this winter, my father and I were discussing the apparently insurmountable ideological differences between the left and right that have become so evident during the last two presidential election cycles. My brilliant dad, hi Dad, noted that each side was actually living in separate universes. They told separate stories about what happened. The conversation reminded me of the work of my old professor at UVA, Dr. Jonathan Haidt. In his recent book, The Righteous Mind, Haidt argues that humans are essentially intuitive beings. Our universes and actions are shaped instantly through intuition. And only afterwards do we use reason to explain the intuitive decisions we've already made. Essentially, Haidt gave the scientific explanation for why the universes my father was describing couldn't be aligned. They weren't rational decisions about facts. They were flash intuitions about the way the world was organized. So, my dad and I reread the book together, fully expecting, of course, that by the time we finished Haidt's book, we'd learn how to overcome this intuitive knowing that defined our experiences. With absolutely no pressure on the professor, I was wondering, if we're all just intuitive beings, good at creating after-the-fact explanations of our behavior, what hope is there for real change? Unsurprisingly, the answer wasn't in the book. But then this summer, I read another book, Begin Again, by Professor Eddie Glaude Jr. The connection to that dear rock of mine seemed important right away. In it, Professor Glaude examines the development of the ideas of race in America vis-a-vis James Baldwin's writing. Professor Glaude approaches the examination not as an intellectual exercise, but instead with the thesis that Baldwin's ideas, written 60 years ago, are still relevant to the national conversations about race we hear in America today. In particular, Glaude lifts up Baldwin's idea of sacred witness. To be a sacred witness is to, and I quote, tell a different story about who we are by way of honest encounter with our past that challenges the repetition of myths and legends. Baldwin believed that humans are storytellers. We tell ourselves stories to explain how we behaved. And in this, I hear echoes of Haidt's understanding, and I see my rocks. Humans tend to tell stories that fit into simple narrative arcs, stories that have one narrator, one protagonist, one journey, always towards redemption. Stories that say, we are a nation that made room for my immigrant grandparents. So if your immigration experience left you impoverished, that must be your fault. Or stories that say, I'm a kind person. So that person who I treated so poorly, they must have deserved it. According to Baldwin, we tend to write these simple stories, stories without nuance, the kind we would expect from a young child, but that we tell as mature adults. However, according to Glaude, there is another kind of story that can be told. A story that challenges the repetition of myths and legends and refuses to give us the comfort of nostalgia and the longing for simpler times. This is the story of James Baldwin when he acts as sacred witness. Baldwin wrote of the job of the poet that the poet is, and I quote, called to defeat all labels and complicate all battles, to bear witness as long as breath is in him, to that mighty, unnameable, transfiguring force which lives in the soul of man. A sacred witness is one who makes room in their narrative for the whole story, not just the story we tell ourselves. The story that sacred witnesses tell, I imagine, like a peony unfurling its petals in the morning sun. Its complete unraveling defies imagination. How could so much have been held so tightly together? Stories told by the sacred witness contain overlapping experiences and moments that initially seem to contradict one another. But truth, like the peony, is more beautiful because of its intricacy. To be a sacred witness is to tell the old story, but with a wider lens that allows for multiple points of view. It is a story that says the old story wasn't the whole story. This story is large enough for contradiction because it recognizes that humans are inherently sacred and also that we're deeply flawed. There can be no hero, no simple plot to this new kind of story. Instead, the sacred witness embraces the messiness of real life. Sacred witnesses tell stories that involve lofty ideals and deeply disappointing actions. A sacred witness to America's story might involve celebrating the land that was a refuge for my ancestors and an enslaver of yours. Nicole Hannah Jones tells a sacred story when she thanks the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill for what she learned there and condemns them for refusing her tenure, a title she clearly earned. Or when Stacy Marshall returned to her family's Georgia farmland and began a journey that explores both her family's legacy and the legacy of the 7 people owned by her family. Baldwin invites us all to tell stories as sacred witness, like these women tell. But there is something about these women's stories that stands out to me. While they intersect with the national conversation, they are deeply personal. And I think that if we hope to tell stories about our country that rise to the level of sacred witness, we must first begin to tell those sacred stories about ourselves. The question for this moment of American history seems to be, not only can I stand in sacred witness to the country, but can I first do so for myself? Can I see where I shine? And can I see where I falter? Yom Kippur is an invitation to start telling these newer, truer, more complicated stories. Stories about ourselves that interrogate the patterns that mark our mistakes. Stories whose mess serves as invitation. Because through their complexity, through their messiness, I think, James Baldwin thinks, Professor Eddie Glaude thinks, that we might just be able to begin again. What? You thought we were here to do Teshuvah, right? To say sorry for our mistakes and move on into the next year. What I'm suggesting is that this year, doing Teshuvah means telling these different stories about ourselves. I'm hoping to redefine this Teshuvah party we've been invited to. In the Mishnah Torah, Maimonides writes, "And he must confess verbally and say these things in his heart." What does a person have to do to participate in Teshuvah? To tell a story out loud and in your heart is to admit that your mistakes may not be outliers or one-offs. They may not be slip-ups that might never have happened or probably aren't even worth mentioning. To tell a story out loud and in your heart is to learn to see these complicated moments as real, bona fide patterns of behavior, actions that have consequences. To see them as mistakes that we carry forward every day. To own that we have stories that are uncomfortable to tell. Stories that get stuck in our throat and our heart. However, as Maimonides shows us, fully acknowledging the wrong is what makes true Teshuvah possible. In The Fire Next Time, Baldwin writes, "To accept one's past, one's history, is not the same thing as drowning in it. It is learning how to use it. An invented past can never be used. It cracks and crumbles under the pressures of life like clay in a season of drought." This year, to participate in Teshuvah is to find the stories we tell about ourselves that are crumbling and cracking under the pressure of real life. The crumbling at the national level is pretty obvious. Today, though, we begin again with ourselves. And we do so from a place of hope. For as modern sage and scholar Dr. Brene Brown points out, the ability to hold something we've done or failed to do up against who we want to be is incredibly adaptive. It's uncomfortable, but it's adaptive. So today, I pick up my rock engraved, "Begin Again." I examine the patterns and the stories that mark my mistakes. I tell the story of what happened, but this time, I strive to tell it more fully than it has been told before. This time, I shine a light on parts of my history that have been shrouded in darkness. And the fullness, the light, the wholeness I am seeking to uncover offers hope for tomorrow. Gamar Tov. May we be inscribed for blessing in the Book of Life.
Olam chesed yivaneh, yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. 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 I will build this world from love. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. And you must build this world from love. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. And if we build this world from love, yadadai, 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 then God will build this world from love. Yadadai, yadadai, yadadai. Olam chesed yivaneh, yadadai, yadadai, yadadai.
infinite source of goodness, help us to see the good in ourselves, in others, and in the world around us.
Teach us to cultivate a discerning mind, to know right from wrong, and a listening heart open to love and forgiveness.
Guide us to walk in your ways with integrity, ever faithful to the promise our forebears made.
And may we continually inspire each other to do what is right and just.
Ken Yehi Ratzon. May it be so.